Have you ever felt like life is happening to you and not for you? Have you struggled with setbacks, comparison, or feeling stuck in a cycle of self-doubt? In today's episode, I sit down with Dr. Scott Kaufman, a psychologist, speaker, and best-selling author, to break down how to overcome a victim mindset, regulate your own emotions, and empower yourself to reach your full potential. Dr. Kaufman shares insights from his new book called Rise Above: Overcome a Victim Mindset, Empower Yourself, and Realize Your Full Potential. And he provides practical tools to help you take control of your thoughts, your emotions, and actions so that you can create the life that you want. I'm really excited about this interview because this is the third appearance of Dr. Scott Kaufman on the Best You podcast. It's been a couple of years since he's been on, and I've built a good relationship with him and just really love him and his energy and his quirkiness and the value that he brings to the table. So I'm sure you guys will love it as well. But before we dive in, if you're listening on the Apple Podcast app or on Spotify, make sure you hit the follow button. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit like and subscribe down below. All right, what's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Best You podcast. Today, I am super excited to be joined by, once again, for the third time on the Best You podcast, Dr. Scott Barry Kaufman. And it's been a while since I've had Scott on, but I've always been very thankful for Scott and our relationship. Not that we're super, super close, but he's somebody that I look up to from a distance, and we've kept in touch over the years. And so I just really appreciate his relationship with me and his support of me. And I really know that you guys will get a ton of valuable lessons and knowledge from today's episode, because he's coming out with the third book that I've interviewed him on, which is called Rise Above: Overcome a Victim Mindset, Empower Yourself, and Realize Your Full Potential. And I know a few of the things that we're going to be talking about today are on the topics of managing our emotions, self-esteem, and then sensitivity. And I also know that it's very timely because Scott was kind of right in the midst in LA of the wildfires, and what part of the title of the book is Overcoming a Victim Mindset. And, it's very easy when a tragic situation happens to adopt a type of victim mindset. So I feel like we might dive into some of that towards the end as well. But Scott, I wanted to start off talking about managing emotions, because I know this is something that all of us are working on, whether we are really good or really bad or somewhere in the middle. We're always trying to improve on how do we manage our emotions. And I've kind of heard people talk about how emotions are oftentimes dictated by what we're focusing on and where our mental energy is being placed. So I want to ask you, just to start, how do you think about how we can properly navigate and manage our emotions?
Thanks, Nick. Well, first of all, let me just thank you for having me on your show again. I look up to you as well, and I think about you often when I'm in the gym, and I think I want to push myself a little bit more than I would normally push myself. I think, what would Nick Carrier do? So I want to really thank you for that. The idea of emotion regulation is a really rich psychological literature, and there's no quick fixes, there's no hacks. I'm not going to come at you with any protocols, but I will say that the whole idea of emotional regulation is not the same as emotional inhibition. It's pretty much recognized that proper emotional regulation is having the right emotions at the right time. And, so there's no one size fits all for all situations. You want to regulate so that you're obtaining your goals and that you're not shooting yourself in the foot, that you're, especially with your longer term goals. Often uncomfortable emotions such as anxiety, and fear do get in the way of our self-actualization and our attainment of longer term goals, because a lot of our longer term goals really require taking risks and getting into environments and situations that are scary. Like if it's not scary, it's hard to grow if you don't face your fears. So with all that said, I'm a big fan of the principle of cognitive distancing, being able to get to a mindful state where you don't feel like you're identified with your emotions. That you're able to create a bit of a distance. Sometimes it helps to take the thoughts that are in your head and not take them so seriously by saying them out loud, and then saying them in funny ways, elongating them, Like I'm scared, and just getting it out of your head. Even just telling other people how you're feeling sometimes can make the thing disappear completely, you know. I found that when I've been anxious, if I'm with someone and I don't try to hide that fact from someone, I say, wow, I'm feeling anxious right now. My anxiety really just kind of disappears. The more you kind of honor these emotions, they just want to pay. They're little babies, and they want to be paid attention to. They want to be loved, um, and uh, and they really are not trying to hijack the rest of you. And if you kind of treat them as your beautiful monsters, um, uh, I think that you'll be better off.
Yeah, no, I like that. The idea of cognitive distancing and not identifying your emotions and like making them a kind of separate thing outside of yourself. You talked about the difference that you distinguish between emotional regulation and emotional inhibition. And you said emotional regulation is kind of like having the right emotions at the right time. First off, is that right? And then emotional inhibition, how do you describe that?
Emotional inhibition is simply trying to like play whack-a-mole with your emotions. Every time an uncomfortable emotion arises, you're like, "Oh, gotta get rid of that. I gotta get rid of that. I must be happy at all times." Who thinks we should be happy at all times? I mean, there's kind of this assumption that like you're supposed to be somewhat, in a joyful mood, and if you're not, then you can blame it on trauma. Like that's the kind of narrative we have going around our society right now. But it's perfectly normal to feel anxious. It's perfectly normal to feel trepidation, fear. You can go through the whole list of uncomfortable emotions, jealousy, um, but also all these things can be really fueled into what you want to do. Emotions like jealousy and competitiveness, can really launch someone to greatness, especially creative greatness. I don't treat any of these things as things that should be eradicated from the kingdom.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think a lot of people do think that negative emotions are simply a bad thing. It's like no emotions are necessarily bad. It's just how you use them, right? Like if you have a negative emotion, I think that that should be a piece of feedback and piece of information for you to be like, okay, why am I experiencing this negative emotion? Either what do I not have, or what kind of state is putting me in this, and what can I do to leverage this negative emotion and channel it in a positive way? Like you just said, some negative emotions can be really good fuel and provide you with a sense of urgency to do great things.
Yes, I should be interviewing you.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Everybody would be very bored out of their mind. In the description, thanks, thanks. I'm interested. In part of the about the book, you talk about there's a double-edged sword of self-esteem. Talk to me about what you mean by that.
Yeah, I mean there is a double-edged sword in the sense that we want to feel like we're worthy, we're competent, but it can also lead to overconfidence, a lack of humility, and not a realistic understanding or realistic view of where you are in the social world and how people are viewing you. Um, so low self-esteem can be a good thing. I mean, maybe that's a controversial thing to say in my new book, but it's really just a sign, a signpost, or it's an indicator, just like all of our emotions are. That may be something to look into or pay attention to. If we keep getting rejected over and over again, and it leads to a low self-esteem, yes, you can have a victim mentality. Sure, it's very easy to then just blame all 50 people for rejecting you and saying haters gonna hate, but you're probably not gonna grow, and you're probably not gonna learn anything, you know. So I don't know. I think it's okay to have moments of low self-esteem, moments of high self-esteem. I think the person who has high self-esteem all the time, 24/7, no matter what, I think is a dangerous person.
Yeah, no, 100%. Right. There's always like, there's times and places for each of these things and spectrums for each of these things, right? Like, I think there's a balance and a duality of you need to be confident in your abilities that you actually have, but you also need to be fully aware of the fact that you don't have so many different abilities and you don't have a ton of knowledge, and you need to be humble in that fact and realize that, hey, this is actually an opportunity to grow. Because don't feel like if you feel like you have all the knowledge, then you're not going to seek out any knowledge. And so you need to have that balance of both of those things.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself.
Um, the overcoming a victim mindset, I kind of want to just go ahead and dive into it because of the wildfires that recently went on in LA that you were right in the midst of. And I'm so glad that everything with you personally is doing okay. When a tragedy like that happens in somebody's life and they're struck with basically something they had completely no control over and something that they couldn't have done anything about, it's very easy for a situation like that in particular to be like, I'm a victim, I feel sorry for myself, etc. What in like almost like immediately after this happens, in the couple weeks after this happens, what are some like conversations that you have with yourself and some things that you do to ensure that you're not taking on that mindset and that mentality?
I think we could all learn to harness more of a Nick Carrier mindset. There are just like in the sports world, if you have a bad day at the gym, you don't give up. If you hit a plateau or even a setback, let's say you break your arm, on a horrible, unexpected thing, you do a bench press, you break your arm, you heal, but you think about, what you can do to get back in the game, and I just think that applying these kinds of more empowering mindsets to everything in life is very, very important. You can have a trauma without being traumatized. You can be a victim without having a victim mindset. Um, well, I know people, their entire house burnt down, like, um, and it sucks, but, they're like, well, thank God it wasn't a person, who burnt down. You can try to still have gratefulness. And also there is sometimes a great silver lining in starting over. Sometimes we get stuck in our patterns and we need something to kind of get out of our patterns. Um, Not that, we need our house being burnt down, of course, but
Mm.
but having post-traumatic growth is very possible, and I don't think a lot of people got that memo,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. Yeah, I love how I feel like in maybe the very first podcast we did together, we talked a lot about post traumatic growth. Has there ever been a time in your life where you kind of realized that, man, I've been holding a victim mindset for a while now, and then what did you do what are some things that you've done to like get out of that?
Every time I've been very mindful because I can fall prey into that just like anyone else, and I can find myself blaming others for, why is that person more successful? Why Huberman and not me? Like stuff like that. 99% of podcasters are asking the same question. And, I'm laughing because I'm friends with him, um, it's like, you can get into a victim mindset or and what I do personally, every time I find myself slipping in, because, I say this just because I'm human, right? And I want to make that very clear, you know, when I find myself slipping into that, I lean into what's unique about me. I lean into my own, like, who is Scott Barry Kaufman? Well, I'm very quirky. I'm very, I'm honest. I'm authentic. I'm interested in the truth. I'm interested in helping people. I'm also funny, you know. I mean, people have said I'm funny. I don't know if you can be funny if you just say you're funny, um, just be, I think I'm very human. And lean into who you are more and more, and don't worry about comparing yourself to others and or blaming others for all your problems because that's not going to be empowering for you. That doesn't get you out of. That doesn't get you to where you want to go.
Yeah.
Blaming others for
Let's
all your problems doesn't get you where you want to go.
Yeah, let's dive deeper into this comparison thing. So I've thought a lot about comparison in general, because obviously it's impossible not to compare yourself to a certain degree with our day and age right now, and it's not going to get any less so, because everybody's insight into everybody's lives is just getting more and more and more. And so inevitably we are going to see other people who are more this than us, more that than us, more whatever than us, and that can give us a sense of potentially like self-lack. But I try to change my relationship with comparison for the most part, rather than try not to compare, because obviously the most important person to compare yourself to is the past version of yourself, but there's still inevitable comparison to other people. How do you deal with comparison? I know you talked about leaning into what's unique about you. I think that's absolutely huge. What are some other like strategies that you think about when it comes to the idea of comparison?
You and a lot of people who like you are really interested in high performance can get a little too stuck on objective metrics, quantitative metrics. And my advice would be to, also mix in qualitative metrics.
Mm.
Like Nick, who is Nick Carrier? What is Nick presenting to this world? What is your unique purpose, your unique calling? And there's no way to quantify that. There's no way to say like, oh, well, person X reached 40% of your purpose, you know, so we should compare ourselves. That question doesn't even make sense.
Yeah.
Just really lean into that and stay focused and stay driven, because that's just what life's all about. I mean, day in and day out, showing up to who you are and what you're trying to put out in the world is the best you can do. Just do the best you can do, and you will live a life worth living. A life worth living isn't one where you constantly feel inferior because you're not living up to some objective metrics. A life worth living is one where you are experientially alive, and you can't quantify experiential aliveness.
Yeah, I love that. I love that phrase, experientially alive. That's great. I'm gonna ask you kind of a personal question, but I think it aligns with this. So one of the things I've enjoyed seeing you do over the last months or however long it's been now is you started to you created the social media account, the amazing Dr. Scott, and you do some psychological magic and stuff. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because you are a successful author, you're a successful psychologist, you've been successful in this area of your life, and you're kind of like going in to uncharted territory and doing something kind of new, if you will, and stretching yourself and taking a risk, if you will, and spending your focus on something else. What led you to starting this new endeavor, if you will?
Well, I love challenges. I love puzzles. I love learning new things. So like even just at a hobby level, I always want to be like if I'm not doing crossword, I see it like doing crossword puzzles. Instead, I'm learning magic, like I love puzzles and I love giving people awe and wonder. And I love showing people that they're capable of a lot more than they realize. And I have been trying to sit down and think through what a stage show would look like where I help unlock people's potential through magic. And so, yeah, to me, it all relates. Everything feeds into some similar thread that is unique to me.
Yeah, what's been like the biggest challenge for you going into this new endeavor? And like what's been the biggest like frustrating thing, the biggest challenge that you've run into when trying to do something that's kind of completely new to you?
Money, buying lots of magic tricks. The the financial aspect of it, I'm kind of obsessed.
Yeah.
Well, I think that whenever you know, time is such a limited resource, and I think for high performers like you and me, I think it's very natural and common to constantly be asking yourself, you know, I'm investing in this hour, 8 hours today. What else could I have been investing this 8 hours in? And I think it's like we can get really lost in that, and we can get really, it can be really stressful. I mean, do you resonate with that?
100%.
Yeah, because you're like, okay, like if I spent 8 hours, if I focus on building up these reps, I'm not spending the time working on those reps, of whatever it is. And I think that's very fair question. So of course I think to myself, you know, uh, I want to make sure that I'm not neglecting my full potential in psychology and in the mission I have going on there. So, just on a personal level, you asked me a personal question, so I'll give you an honest answer. Um, I make sure that the work is done first, that I want to get done in my primary area of life. And then, I say, oh, goody, I have 3 hours left over tonight. I can learn a new trick. There's more to life than just one thing. But I do realize we have hierarchies and we have different things that take precedence. Maybe it's your wife, like maybe it's really cultivating a marriage, and you have to be really strict, I think, in making sure you prioritize the things in your life you want to prioritize, but also leaving time and room left over for other things that bring you joy in life. Right now, it's magic for me, but it may be a wife next year or this year. So, hey, who knows?
Nice.
But right now, it's mentalism.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. No, I really appreciate you sharing that because and being vulnerable with that because of course I experienced the same thing. And I think a lot of people do. Like, is doing this actually the best use of my time, or should I be doing that, or should I be doing that, or should I be doing that? And it's like to an extent trial and error, and you just have to have an internal sense of like, is this the right thing that I should be doing? And like, you never really know, but you have to try as best you can to decisively do it and not just bounce back and forth from thing to thing constantly. And then the other thing I think about, I visualize and conceptualize my life in 6 different areas: my health, my personal life, my career, my finances, my spiritual life, and my relationships. And I am at all times each week allocating the precious resource of time across all those 6 areas in whatever way I deem appropriate for me for that upcoming week. And the way I think about it is like everybody should be allocating some time to all of those areas basically at each week, because if you're not, you're going to be unfulfilled, you're not going to self-actualize, etc. And it's like, this is for you in the personal area of your life, this is filling you up. And of course, maybe that's time that is taken away from the career, but it's like, to be a well-balanced, fully self-actualized human being, that's what it's going to take.
It is. I mean, it takes a lot of organization of your life. It takes a lot of focus. I think that it's frustrating for a lot of people who have. It's frustrating, and also there's benefits for those who are neurodivergent. Like if you have ADHD, it can be hard to manage your life, and you are constantly shifting from one thing to another, and that's why we can't do it alone. I want to really impress upon you and your listeners the value of a community, holding each other accountable and helping each other and empowering each other. If you're blessed to be able to be part of a community of like-minded people, it can be really helpful. We can't do it alone, and especially the people who really have attentional issues, and can't have trouble focusing more than 20 minutes, at a time. It's a real thing for a lot of people. Helping them get into the flow state, I think, is so valuable, and helping everyone get into the flow state, and not giving up if you don't get into it in the first 5 minutes. It'll click in. It'll click in. Keep at it. 5, 10, 20 minutes. You'll eventually get there. The mind will settle, and you'll be able to focus and get into that magical flow state. But really helping people get into that flow state. I used to be a flow coach. That used to be my job. So this is something very, very important to me.
Yeah. I love how you bring up the importance of community. What does that look like in your life? Like, what kind of communities are you in or groups are you in that uh, feel like nurture you?
It depends on the area we're talking about.
Yeah.
But like I want to like really look good for my book release, so I've been hitting Gold's Gym quite a bit here in Venice. Yeah, yeah, oh yeah, come on. No, but here in Venice. And you know, it's just like it's so inspiring. I mean, there's so many everyone around me are these meatheads, but they're so like, you know, in good shape.
Yeah. I love
And
it.
it's so inspiring, you know. See, hey, what's up, Arnold? Arnold, you know, what's up? I actually see RFK Jr. there a lot.
Oh,
You know,
wow.
yeah, just like, you know, just people who are really committed to their health and well-being inspires me.
Yeah, I love it. I'm really excited to read this book. I feel like a lot of your books have similar tones, right? Like self-actualization and growth and becoming the best version of yourself. What do you feel like is unique about Rise Above that it offers that some of the stuff that you've put together in the past doesn't? So what is unique about this newest book for you?
Yeah, so in some ways this is like my magnum opus. It's like bringing together different threads of my work of the past 25 years, you know, into a tome that really is about empowering yourself and changing the stories you tell about yourself and your own potential in various different ways. That's been a big message of my whole career, but this one really zooms in on this particular mindset. I call it an empowerment mindset as opposed to a victim mindset, which I've never zoomed in on before so much. Yeah.
That's awesome. The last kind of topic we're gonna tackle real quick.
Till you read it, Nick. I can't wait till you read it.
Oh, believe me, I'm gonna eat it up.
Gotta get you a copy.
Yeah, the last topic I want to cover is what you just said, changing the stories you tell about yourself. This is something that we all deal with, but this is something that I also see a ton in the health and fitness space because a lot of people have this self identity, let's say, before I might coach them of like, I've always been out of shape, or I've always looked like this, or I've always eaten like this, etc. You name it. I insert have done this behavior, have looked this particular way. And so one of the things that I attempt to do with them is to rewire the way that they look at themselves, rewire their self-identity. And I think that's done by the things that you say about yourself, the things that you say about yourself to others, obviously the habits that you see yourself repeatedly doing. What are some ways that people can change their self-identity, change the way that they look about themselves and change their past narrative?
Well, the best way to change the way you look at yourself is to change your behaviors. It's not rocket science. I'm a big fan of the behavioral activation approach. If you consistently, you know, eat unhealthy, you're gonna create an identity that you're an unhealthy person. If you could start consistently eating healthy, you're gonna be like, I'm a healthy person. You know, like you need at some point you need to act, even if it's not what you're in the mood for or what you feel like doing. You have to just keep moving in the direction of who you want to become. You know, your identity can change. Yeah, but first you have to get real clear on who do you want to become.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the way that I also think about it, so for as you might know, I coach people in like 10-week transformations, and a lot of people will do multiple.
I see them. Yes.
A lot of people will do multiple of them, and one of the things that I communicate to people is I think that people create two versions of themselves. The version of themselves that is in the middle of a 10-week transformation, and then the version of themselves that is not in the middle of a 10-week transformation. And they kind of conceptualize that being as two different people who have two different sets of habits. And so, even if they do the good habits great for 10 weeks, they might fall off afterwards. And I think that's because they conceptualize as two different beings. And so, how is there like a length of time you feel like that people need to be doing the behaviors to then see it as who they are?
Well, we know that behavioral change, really 6 weeks is such a important. How long is your transformative?
It's 10.
Well, that's great, man. That I want to take your program.
Let's go, baby.
I love it. I love it. Um, really 6 weeks, or even 4 weeks, if you can really, really prevent yourself from engaging in what you have used to engage in that you don't want to engage in anymore. But I think that even very small changes and in your identity that in itself can be the causal force that sets off something new. So when I first started, a year ago, when I first started getting into mentalism, I got business cards. I'm like, I'm a mentalist now. Like, I didn't wait to change my identity. And I don't think you always have to wait to change your identity. Like, if you decide, you just wake up and you decide, I'm a healthy person. That mentality can be the causal force that really causes a transformation in you. So that's something else I would say.
No, I love that. I think that's so true. The mentality and like the commitment to this is now who I am is huge, but then it has to be backed up over time by the behaviors, right? Like if you told yourself you were a mentalist and then you didn't actually do any mentalist work, then you wouldn't actually feel like you were. And so I do think that like, I think some people, the order of operations can be different. Some people it's like the behaviors and then they really believe and have the commitment. And some people it's the commitment and then the behaviors reinforce such commitment.
Yeah, they're self-reinforcing cycles, and that's what you want to create in your life. I mean, you see this with your clients. I see the pictures. I see the pictures. I'm so proud of you, Nick. And I'm also proud of your clients. Yeah.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it. It's definitely they're doing the work, that's for sure. But I'm super excited, like I said, about the book. You guys need to make sure you go pre-order a copy now. I think April 22nd is the full release date. It's called Rise Above: Overcome a Victim Mindset, Empower Yourself, and Realize Your Full Potential. We'll make sure to have obviously the link in the show notes and in the description below. You also need to go follow Scott on Instagram at scottbarrykaufman, and you can go to his website, scottbarrykaufman.com as well. Is there any other good place that people should go learn more about you?
Well, you mentioned my magic. That's at The Amazing Dr. Scott.
Yeah, there you go. The Amazing Dr. Scott. I love it. I love it. That's awesome. But seriously, guys, go grab this book. I know a lot of us are working on managing our emotions, overcoming victim mindsets, and going out and becoming our fully self-actualized best version of ourselves. But that's all we got today, Scott. Really appreciate the time, man. It's always a joy to be able to join and speak with you. So I really appreciate the time.
Likewise, man. Likewise.
That was such a powerful episode with Scott, filled with game-changing insights on how to overcome that victim mindset and step into your full potential and regulate your emotions and handling comparison. And I loved diving into some of his personal life with how he's become a mentalist and really stretching himself into new uncharted waters, if you will. If you enjoyed this episode, do me a favor, hit that follow button on the Apple Podcast app or on Spotify. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit like and subscribe down below so you don't miss future episodes, because we're going to continue to come out with bangers. And I am really excited to show you guys the brand new Best You podcast studio that is coming soon. But before we end today, here are my 3 biggest takeaways from today's conversation. Number 1 is your mindset determines your reality. You see, when you shift your mindset from one of victimhood to empowerment, and when you shift from focusing on what you don't have to gratefulness, then it can make a huge difference. And he even mentioned oftentimes that how there is a silver lining in starting over, but oftentimes we don't realize that until we can see it in hindsight, but have faith that that will happen. Number 2, emotional regulation is key. I liked the idea that number 1, your negative emotions are not bad things. You can actually leverage them in positive ways. And number 2, cognitive distancing. You do not equal your emotions, so don't identify yourself by your emotions. And you can do even silly things like Scott did during the interview. You can speak some of your emotions out loud. You can say, I'm scared, I'm scared, I'm scared. And like that will de-escalate the negative emotion that you have. And then third and finally, the biggest takeaway is comparison is a trap. Instead of measuring yourself against others, focus on what's unique about you. Focus on your gifts, your talents, and your story. If you can do these things, you'll continue to get closer to the healthiest version of yourself, and ultimately, you'll continue to get closer and closer to your best you.